Well, welcome back to the SBK Betting Podcast, where normal service resumes. The family is back. We're reunited after just a brief hiatus, which left Tom and James in charge to preview the Dublin Racing Festival and Sandown from last weekend. And what a weekend it was. Sparkling performances, with it all just being about one team in particular, the Willie Mullins team over in Ireland, and over in England, the Gary Moore team as well. But it was the Dublin Racing Festival that left essentially all the British trainers waking in their boots, as the Irish just look so strong, looking towards the Cheltenham Festival, which is creeping ever so closely. And the podcast last week, we were pleased that Tom and James both tipped up Blue Lord at 6-4, and he has tested his article credentials. It wasn't easy or plain sailing, but the nap came in for Tom as well. We'll get cracking into this weekend's action. Newbury host the Betfair Hurdle. The Super Saturday, they like to call it, is always a good one. And over the years gone by, they've been succumbed to weather failings and cancellations. And last year it was actually postponed to the week later. This year, looks like we've got some fair weather here, good soft ground, nice, decent card. We'll get into the Betfair Hurdle, but we'll start with the Game Spirit Chase at 3 o'clock. This race has always been a real indicator to the Champion Chase in years gone by. Altior won this on 3 occasions. And this year we've got sort of what we like to hope bar Shishkin, the best of the British, perhaps, for the Champion Chase. We've got Sir Royale in there at 7-2, with Hitman at 7-2 joint favourites, Venerable Savola for the Venetia Williams team at 4-1, Editor de Geet at 6-1, and Sky Pirate at 7-1. I say the best of the British with a slight reservation, because I don't feel this is a race of enormous amount of strength. Or is there a potential threat to the Champion Chase betting in this race? I'll come to you, James Millman, first.
Yeah, I think no threats for the Champion Chase, but a fascinating race in its own right, because all four that we got left are certainly ones you could give a chance to. Sir Royale, the old boy, he sets a standard. He's 10-year-old now, taking on 6-7-year-olds. He's got the £6 penalty as well. Could he be a little bit vulnerable? He's been over hurdles this campaign. Started off well, good effort in the fight in fifth. A little bit disappointing at Cheltenham last time. I'm going to go elsewhere. I think Hitman has had a good season, really. Second in both his targets. The Holden Gold Cup, Eldorado Allen outstayed him, I thought, up the hill at Exeter. Then behind Grenadine, he got the 1-2 for Paul Nicholls. He ran well in a Tingle Creek. It was a solid run. He's worth that mark of 160, getting £6. I think he's definitely the one to be with. I like Fernando Savola. You mentioned Venetia Chai Deutsche, absolutely flying at the moment. I loved his Peterborough second, even though he won last time. I thought it was hard work behind the big bite, and I put him up at Cheltenham on New Year's Day, and he disappointed me a little bit on that occasion. So I don't know if he's built on that form of his return as the second as much as I expected him to. So for that reason, Hitman is the confident choice.
Yeah, well, Paul Nicholls bypassed the SBK Clarence House Chase in favour of this in order to avoid the lead protagonists in the Champion Chase in Energamena and Shishkin, and that was for a reason. He's done this, Ross. I'll come to you now, to avoid these horses, but he's still got Sorel, last year's winner, returning to fences for the first time this season. But I personally like the two horses that are stepping into graded company, Editor de Geet and Vulnerable Savola. There could be anything horses. They're taking the route that their trainers like to do step by step. Do you see that Hitman, coming into this, he is the class act, but it's not as straight a task as Paul Nicholls might have envisaged?
I don't see Hitman as the class act at all, actually. He's a horse, a big, strong, strapping chaser. It's the sort of horse I love, and I've never warmed to him. And I have him slightly as tripless. I don't think he's got enough stamina for 2.5, and I don't think he's a genuinely quick enough horse at 2 miles. So this goodish ground at Newbury, I thought it was the stiff nature of the track and the soft ground at Sandown that got him as close as he did. And I don't think that race, the Tingle Creek, stands up to scrutiny. Fernando Savola is interesting, but his form hasn't gone on, as James said, from his very first run. And if you used before midnight as a sort of form line, he beat him a length, giving him £4. Sky Pirate was beaten 4.5 lengths, but was conceding £15. So, there's only a couple of pound between them. At the prices, I sort of got tempted into talking about Sky Pirate, but I just can't convince myself that they're not thinking about the Grand Annual at Cheltenham, and maybe they wouldn't mind being beaten a couple of lengths here and coming down a couple of pound. So for me, the class horse in the race is So Royale. I don't think any of these are going to trouble the judge for the Champion Chase this year, but I think So Royale was very unlucky last year in a admittedly weak Queen Mother Champion Chase. He got hampered at third last. He suffered no luck in running and was probably unlucky not to go very close. He's been freshened up by a break. He'll like this good ground. I think if Funambule Savola can beat him, I think he is a more progressive horse than I have him down for. So not hugely confident, but for me, it was So Royale.
Yeah, as you'd say, I thought it was really crucial that they have freshened him up, that was the excuse for why he performed so poorly last time out at Cheltenham, because everything was seemingly in his favour. The ground was at its best for him, and they couldn't really explain the poor performance. So freshened up, back over fences. He's an admirable sort. He loves both obstacles, and he had that interesting clash with Champ last year. And look, as you say, Hitman can be a bit wayward. Tom, thoughts on this? As we say, Hitman, couple of questions to answer. So Royale, he's just this likable terrier of a horse that had quite an interesting battle with Champ last year. Where are you falling down here?
Yeah, it's an interesting race, extremely trappy race, and that's reflected in the market. Normally in a 4-runner race, you've got a pretty strong favourite, but we don't in this contest. I think there's holes in Hitman's form as well. I'm in Ross's camp there. Look, he's only won twice for Paul Nicholls, once at 1-7 in an egg and spoon race. The other time he won by 30 lengths, but only 2 horses finished. Yeah, he finished second in the Tingle Creek, but Chac and Poursoir and Nube Negra didn't run it to their best. So it's hard to take that form literally as well. I prefer So Royale as well. I think he's a solid horse in the race. He's been to Newbury on 2 occasions, both times in this race. Finished second to Altior. He beat Champ, recorded an RPR of 168 on both occasions. If he gets close to 168, he will win this event. And I love that he's been freshened up. Before that race at Cheltenham, he looked like he was right back to his best this year. Yes, at Cheltenham he disappointed, but he still travelled for a long way in that race before just flattening out. So I think if So Royale, the actual true So Royale turns up, he'll win this race.
Okay, well, a couple of pretty confident selections for So Royale. I'm going to go with the Venetia Williams train Funambule Savola to keep their great train rolling just week after week. They seem to be keeping their horses at the same level they have been, and Charlie Deutsch has just been riding magnificently. My disagreement with the guys is that I do think that they were getting his trip wrong at the beginning of the season. 2.5 miles just quite extended him, and over just over 2 miles at Doncaster last time, that seemed to get the best out of him. And I do think that run at Aintree behind Shishkin was very, very eye-catching, and I think that this is a nice move. They obviously have the Grand Annual in their sights as well, and they're giving this a go. Perhaps if he does run his race, the Champion Chase will be the race that they attempt in Venetia Williams. Fresh after Grade 1 success, her first in 20 years last year. So that team, as I say, in brilliant order. We'll head into the Betfair Hurdle, the main race at Newbury on Saturday at 3:35. £155,000 on the table, but only 14 runners. And look, this race has been for so many years, decades upon decades, a race for the ages. We've had some spectacular results, great horses, the likes that have gone on to run in, such as Supreme Novice Hurdles and the likes. It is such a prestigious race. It's been a good guide for Cheltenham. Why there are so few runners has been a big talking point, especially as it seems to be as a good guide for novices going into handicap company for the first time. And novices are essentially dominating the betting market. JPR1 is the 11-2 favourite, Broomfield Berg at 6-1, Nappers Hill 7-1, last year's winner Soaring Glory at 15-2, Boots Hill 9-1. 50 Ball, who was placed in this race last year, 10-1 with Tritonic at 10s, and it's 11-1 Jetoile and Bigger the rest. It's always been a tough race for horses giving weight away. So these lightly raced novices have always been of big interest. So Tom, thoughts on this race? First of all, the fact that there is such a small amount of runners has been a bit of a disappointment. Not one Irish contender. Willie Mullins has obviously elected to choose the more competitive nature he found the handicap last weekend at Leopardstown. But it's still got a good quality to it regardless.
Yeah, it's good quality. It's a wide open betting heat. And yes, Willie Mullins doesn't have any runners over here, but he doesn't really need to test the waters. He knows his handicappers are probably better treated than ours, so he doesn't need to send one over. I still think this is a good race, though. As you mentioned, it's really hard to win off top weight. And Soaring Glory, who won this race last year off a ridiculously lenient mark of 133, tries to do it off £14 higher. I think he'd be bang there at the finish, but he's not my selection. JPR1 was the last horse off my shortlist. I know plenty of people fancy him, and he's probably well handicapped. But the horse I'm going to go for is Boot Hill. Now, this may be a heart-leading head decision because at the start of the season, I thought he was going to be one of the most promising and exciting novice hurdlers in the country. But he's kind of disappointed so far this term. He ran over hurdles, finished third behind Soaring Glory. Looked like he was going to win that race, actually. But then he kind of just flattened out. Now, Harry Fry said he was only 75% fit that day, which is a plausible excuse. He had a long layoff before that. And then over fences last time, he just didn't run his race. Now I'm thinking back to hurdles, maybe we'll see a different Boot Hill. And off a mark of 135, he could be this year's Soaring Glory. Last year over hurdles, that first start over in a novice hurdle was extremely impressive. Like, he looked a proper graded horse in the making. So around, I think, 9-1 in this race, I'd rather take him as opposed to JPR1. And they've both got similar upside, in my opinion. So Boot Hill for me, Jess.
Yeah, 9-1 is a good price. I did think 11-2 currently was pretty skinny, and I know that there are shorter prices outside of that. So SBK is actually providing a better value for JPR1 at the moment. He was as big as 12-1, I think, when the weights came out. I think there's a lot of hype around this horse. He's made a very good start to his novice hurdle campaign. The likes of Boot Hill has got patches of form, but you can sort of forgive him for being in and out, and Harry Fry, attempting him over fences, which just didn't go as well. So an interesting selection in Boot Hill here, who's got the tongue strap on for the first time as well. And Sean Bowen is on board with a nice weight advantage. Looking through the field, James, do you think that there's something here with even slightly better weight on their back? Because that's, for me, what you're always looking for. Who's the best handicap novice in this field?
Yeah, best handicap novice is interesting. I'm going to go for the Kalashnikov route and J12 for Ryan Potter and Lorcan Williams, because like Kalashnikov, trained by a slightly unfashionable trainer, and the fact that they're a little bit unknown. Amy Murphy was more known for her flat exploits. Ryan Potter, I think it's his first full season with a license, a lot of success in the pointing sphere. And this horse won a couple of hurdles at Chepstow and Leicester, and then finished second in Tolworth, just like Kalashnikov did, behind your Supreme / Ballymore Hope, Constitution Hill. For Cheltenham, he was outclassed. No disgrace in that. Handicap mark went at £8. I think 133 is still a pretty nice mark. And because Ryan Potter's not a household name, he surely can get a job done, especially landing a gamble. Very shrewd operation. I like his form. He's a front runner. And sometimes in these big handicap hurdles, there's not actually that much pace on. And again, that might be the case here. I just thought he was a well-treated individual. 11-1 currently of SBK is a nice each way price in this contest, and I think he won't be too far away.
Yeah, look, I completely agree. The novice form will be tested here. It's essentially Constitution Hill versus John Bon. J12 was put firmly in his place by Constitution Hill, and Nappers Hill, who was third to John Bon at Ascot, they're opposing, but their price differentiation is massive. We've got Nappers Hill at 7-1, J12 at 11-1, but Constitution Hill's the better horse. So clearly the value is with J12. So
but he is going for the Ballymore, don't he, Jess?
Look, I'm totally in your camp. I think J12's been overlooked, and I think they were delighted with the run, and considering that ground got very, very testing as well at Sandown that day too. So J12 at 11-1 right now. I can see him actually getting a little shorter than that, but I think these prices might change a lot up until Saturday. I think they'll realise, and I'll come to Ross next, that 11-2 about JPR1, all respect to him, is too short in comparison to essentially what some of the rest of these horses have done in top class graded company.
Yeah, I think the market sort of, because this race has such a good record for novices, I think the novices and perhaps the talented novices get slightly shorter than they should be in the market. I fully respect Jetoile for Ryan Potter, who was a point-to-point trainer in my old stomping ground. They call him the Herefordshire Gavin Cromwell, a farrier that's turning trainer, and he's very, very astute. You know, he might be small in numbers, but he's a smart guy. He knows how to train. I just thought he might prefer softer ground. So I actually came down on two that I'd take against the field. 50 Ball, who was second in this last year, has gone chasing, and it hasn't really worked out. Although his first run behind Manila Trump and Marla's Star wasn't all that bad. It's been regressive since. But crucially, he's now back over hurdles. He's reunited with Josh Moore, who rode him last year. We mentioned last week that Shall We Have One More hadn't gone that well for Jamie Moore and went very well for Josh last week. You could see that happening again. He's £14 better off with Soaring Glory for a 3-length beating. You know, he has got to put it back together over hurdles, but I thought at 10-1, he was an interesting price. And then the other one at 25-1, and I can't quite figure out why this price is Tom Lacey's Glory and Fortune. He bolted up in the Welsh Champion Hurdle off a £9 lower mark, but he was then a very credible 6th in the Greatwood at Cheltenham, where he didn't get a clear passage and stayed on. He was a length behind Tritonic, and he's now £3 better off with him, and Tritonic is half the price. And then finished in front of Soaring Glory in the Christmas Hurdle, which was a bit of a nothing race behind Epatante, I admit. But whilst I understand that Soaring Glory would perhaps be better served by a bigger field and a stronger pace, I don't think that necessarily doesn't apply to Glory and Fortune as well. So 25-1, I thought he was way overpriced, and I'd expect him to be there or thereabouts.
Yeah, two horses that both ran in this race last year, Glory and Fortune, I think was down the field in this race, but I think he's actually developing into a better horse and is really getting the hang of things. And as you say, that run in the Christmas Hurdle really, it was really outdid his odds. And I think that Tom Lacey's just had a bit of an in and out season, but this is one of his better horses, and that this price is probably reflected on the time that they've had. He is 25-1, always a wide open contest. Soaring Glory was backed in last year and came, and it all came good, but he's not just quite being the horse that they wanted him to be this year, but off that big weight, it's going to be very tricky. But we've got some good prices here. Jetoile 11-1 for myself and for James. Glory and Fortune 25-1 for Ross, and 50 Ball at 10-1, and Boot Hill for Tom at 9-1. And the Betfair Hurdle is the Tote Gold Trophy, the Schweppes, as has been known, has always been a good guide. Last year, it was a very good race in the fact that Edwardstone, who was third in it, has turned into a high-class novice chaser, and that is the key horse we're going to talk about now, as he will be running at Warwick in the Kingmaker Novices Chase at 2:05. He's 5-4 favourite currently. He's got Third Time Lucky in behind him at 15-8. We've got Brave Siaska at 5-1 and For Pleasure at 11-1. Tom, I'll come to you first on it, because this is where Third Time Lucky went out very bravely and boldly under Harry Skelton, and it took a lot out of him. And Edwardstone, yes, he beat him fair and square, but I'd say if Harry Skelton had it run again, he would do it slightly differently. And he essentially proved himself to be the horse he was when he ran and won last time out. Tactically, this is going to be really interesting. So how do we feel that Harry Skelton might play this out, looking at what Tom Cannon might do aboard Edwardstone?
I'm a big fan of Third Time Lucky. I've said it on many occasions when he's run in previews, but he's very headstrong. Now, Harry Skelton might be helped in this race because For Pleasure and Brave Siaska will also want to go forward. So Harry might be able to rein Third Time Lucky back in behind those two front runners and get the perfect sit with Edwardstone in last. That's how I kind of envisaged it planning out. Now, the issue is if Third Time Lucky actually wants to go forward and Harry can't control him, then there'll be three horses on the front end and Edwardstone, which just makes Edwardstone a fantastic bet in this race, given the probability of that happening. Just a last thing on Third Time Lucky that I think we should touch on. Many times Dan Skelton has said this horse is best when fresh. Why does he keep running him without gaps? I don't understand it. You've got to just go from his last race straight to the Arkle. It makes no sense in my opinion. I thought he would have had a good each way chance in the Arkle, but not with this run under his belt anyway. But to get on to Edwardstone, he's the most likely winner of this race, no doubt. He's always been extremely talented. He finished second to Chantry House in a bumper, only beating 3 lengths. Then he beat Fiddler on the Roof over hurdles. And now he should be 4th and 4 over fences. Unfortunately, got brought down when For Pleasure fell at Warwick. But he proved that the track at Warwick and the fences, the stiff fences, weren't a problem because he went straight back to Warwick and won again. I just think he's the best horse in this race. The likely setup just makes his chance even better. And what price did you say it was? 6 to 4? That's a phenomenal bet.
5 to 4, I'm afraid.
Still a phenomenal bet. Still a phenomenal bet.
Still not too bad. And yeah, I agree. I read the quote about third time lucky. He had a little bit of an overreach. That's what Dan Skelton has said. They said it's nothing bad, but they'll see how it is. And they weren't that concerned about definitely going to Cheltenham or not, and said that if they goes to Aintree, then that's fine. I assume there's been no issue with that overreach, and that's why he's coming back. But I wouldn't be surprised if they might opt to avoid Cheltenham this year with third time lucky.
His best performance this season has come at Cheltenham. Like, I don't know why you'd avoid that. And also, like, it's been said so many times, this horse is best when fresh. Charlie Post, who broke this horse in, best when fresh. Dan Skelton, best when fresh. Stop running him. Like, give him a gap and then like target him at the main race, which is the Arkle. Like, I can't fancy him going towards Cheltenham after this run, even if he wins.
Somebody's backed him anti-post.
I have. I backed him.
Sorry, say that again.
I backed him anti-post after he won at Cheltenham early in the year. I know it could be pocket talking, but I still think it's like, I'm not a trainer, don't get me wrong, and Dan probably knows more than me. But if you're going to consistently fire out these best when fresh, keep him fresh, no? James
is laughing. I feel like he's got some thoughts on this from a trainer's perspective. Where do you see it?
You make a good point that they've said he's best fresh, but it might well be that inkling they're going to miss Cheltenham completely. Which definitely won't do Tom's anti-post bet much good. But I like Edwardstone. He is the actual British horse I think will do well in the novice chases at the festival, because he was a keen going hurdler. He was always a bit too keen for his own good, even in the big field handicaps, but he was always thereabouts. He was 5th at Cheltenham, 3rd at Aintree. You mentioned 3rd in the Betfair. But he's just excelled going chasing. He jumps particularly well. He settles better as well. I think he respects the bigger obstacles a little bit more. And I've been impressed with each outing so far. And at Sandown, yes, the race fell in his lap. Harry was too forceful on third time lucky, and they changed that tactic at Doncaster. Actually, they rode him more conservatively in behind For Pleasure, and it did seem to help. You'd imagine For Pleasure will go on in front again like he normally does. I just hope he gets a clear round, because he obviously brought down Edwardstone at Warwick at the start of the year. But it's an interesting race. I know Brave Cheska's got to be considered. Tom said he's a front runner, and yes, he can make the running, but I think that Gavin Sheehan will be perfectly happy to sit off a strong pace if there is one. I think he's quite uncomplicated. I remember when he beat Interconnected at Huntingdon over hurdles, he stayed on really strongly to the line. So I don't think he has to front run. He's actually the danger for me to Edwardstone. I'm not a massive third time lucky fan, but I am an Edwardstone fan. And I think if you can get odds against 5-4 currently of SBK, I think that's a cracking bet.
Ross, your thoughts on this? Are you in the Edwardstone camp, and what are your thoughts on what the guys have said about third time lucky and what the Skeltons should be planning with him?
I think the fact they're running tells you they're still not happy with his jumping, and they want match practice. And I think they're right to be worried about his jumping. I think to me, he doesn't jump. He throws himself at defence a lot of time. He was much better last time at Doncaster when Harry rode him with far more sense for my mind and got him to settle, and he quickened up and looked like a smart horse. But he still worries with his jumping. Edwardstone is a super horse, and you have to say it's to his testament. His first try of fences last season, he jumped poorly and unseated, had a horrible time. They went back over hurdles. Then first time this year, got brought down. Plenty of horses would say they didn't fancy fences after that, and he's not. He's got better and better. So I've got a huge amount of time for him. And, if you look at Cheltenham through a UK versus Ireland prism, which I don't really, I just like to see nice horses run big races. But if you're a team UK, you want to see Edwardstone win this and win it by a big margin, because it would then look like we have a genuine chance of winning a a novice race and a novice chase, because we don't look to have a huge many. But I just thought at the prices, Brave Shaska, he's got a bit to do, but he gets £5, and he hasn't yet been afforded the sort of race to run a figure that Third Time Lucky and Edwardstone have. And I could just see him sitting off for pleasure. Gavin Sheard's ridden him twice. There's no issue there with him stepping in for Charlie Deutsch. And if Tom Cannon and Harry Skelton got into a bit of a cat and mouse, sort of just minding each other a bit too much, I just thought there was a chance that Brave Shaska could get loose turning in. And I think he's a tough, strong stayer at the trip and could just take a bit of passing. So again, not a hugely confident pick, but just at the prices, I thought 5-1 about a horse who hasn't got a huge amount to find and is progressive and still improving was enough to tempt me.
Yeah, Gavin Sheehan obviously knows the horse as well, which is of help, whereas Charlie Deutsch is over at Newbury, so back on board, no issue there. That weight pull is something to note as well, but interesting affair, very trappy. I am totally with James and the fact that we want to see and yourself, Ross, and Tom, we want to see a horse of this nature, of Edwardstone, win and win well and sort of as a retaliation from last weekend. And the fact that, look, the Blue Lord, the favourite for the Arkle currently, definitely needs to improve on his jumping to win an Arkle, whereas Edwardstone looks like he's just getting better and better as he races. So look, best of luck to their team in what is a very good-looking Kingmaker novice chase, albeit a small enough field. But Brave Shaska is at 5-1. 5-4 currently for Edwardstone is the value, as Tom Collins says. So we will look forward to that at 2:05. The final race that we're going to look at is a more competitive betting affair at Warwick, and that's the 3:15, the Warwick Castle Handicap Chase. James, Dinny Lacey, talk to me about this horse, because I was trying to have a look, always like to see an Irish horse coming over. Robbie Power is an eye catcher as well. He's 11-1 at present. What do we know about him?
Not a great deal, to be fair, but I felt the fact that he was coming over here, Robbie Power was come over. He often rides for Rob Cordy owners. He was well backed, 5-1 favourite for the Munster National at Limerick back in October. He disappointed on that occasion. They put blinkers on him last time back at Limerick over the Christmas period. He ran an absolute cracker and he got beaten a couple lengths by Spyglass Hill. And we say it time and time again, generally your Irish staying handicaps are probably more competitive than the British versions. He's the only raider. Nothing particularly stood out for me amongst the British raiders, to be honest. Our favourite, the Philip Hobbs horse, you've got a question mark. Haydock, heavy ground form, over hurdle, switching defences. I would just like to see him repeated elsewhere. He's up £15 for 2 wins. He may well be a well-treated individual, but I want to see him do it away from Haydock, which can be a little bit of a course specialist track in the heavy ground conditions. So for me, give a chance to Dinny Lacey. The connections are throwing the dice by coming over here. Robbie Power's getting on the plane. I just thought if he repeats his strongest Irish form, even though he's now £6 higher in the UK, I thought he could be well treated. So in a race I've not got a strong opinion for, the fact that Lacey comes over, I think it's pretty significant, and that's my choice here.
We'll see how they get on. But fair play to them for coming on, taking our horses on. I can't understand why our Power isn't a lot shorter here. His form is rock solid all season, while his uncharacteristic fall 2 starts ago. His form ahead of another horse in Jackamar is good. He meets that horse worse off in the weights, but I do think he's improving. He's 7-1 here. I thought there was a bit of value around. And Tom, thoughts on this as well? Our Power for me, that's where I'm leading, but I don't have that massively strong view, and I think that's reflected in the betting with a few of these horses, a small point difference between them.
Yeah, I can see the case for Our Power. He's definitely improved since he's joined Sam Thomas this year, 2 out of 4 for his new trainer. He's got a great chance in this race. He was on my shortlist, but I came down on one at a bigger price, which is the King of May for Brian Ellison, who's 6 from 25 in the last 2 weeks. I told James I'd bring up a stat, and there is one. The King of May, there's a big negative here, and that is that he's a hold-up merchant. So he's going to need them to go pretty hard early, maybe a pace collapse or something similar. He's also going to need luck in running as well, rounding that bend at Warwick. But he's an accurate jumper. He's got a really good acceleration, turn of foot. He's pacey as well. And on just his second try over 2.5 miles last time out at Sedgefield, he romped home. Like, he looked a different horse stepping up in trip. Now at 11-1, I think you're getting a decent price here about a horse that's got a low weight on his back and is improving. So the King of May for me.
Ross, you love these races. You love finding a horse at even bigger prices. So what have you found?
Yeah, I take your 11-1, Tom, and I raise you. Riders on the Storm, 14-1. Off for a while with new trainer Richard Hobson, ran a massive race at Aintree in tough conditions. Then went to Cheltenham and was very keen and didn't find much up the hill. But I just wonder whether that tough run at Aintree off the back of a break had taken the edge off him. He's been given time, freshened up. He's down £2 now to a mark of 145. He's a forward-going front runner, which I think will suit this track. He's a good jumper. He's not going to suffer any traffic problems. And it wasn't all that long ago that he was one of our UK best 2.5 mile chasers. I think he's got a great chance at the weights. The other one I thought was well handicapped, Wishing and Hoping. I just think this trip's going to be a bit short, but he certainly wanted to have on my radar going into the spring over 3 miles. But for me, Rise on the Storm at 14-1.
Well, we've come to the end of our real previews. We always like to have a look at naps and next best. These came in good for us last week. So we'll start with Ross in nap, please, and your next best.
So Josh and Gary Moore have done me well so far in this month. Authorized Speed runs in the bumper. And I was a huge fan of Henry II and Paul Nicholls. I think that's going to be a super horse. And Authorized Speed got within a length of him at Ascot and then went on to Newbury and absolutely bolted up. I think this is a high-class horse. The Gary Moore yard do very well with their authorized stock. And he's currently 9-2. I think that's a good price. And then my next best, I want to take on Paul Nicholls this weekend. I think given the form and the fact they're still scratching around trying to find a solution, I think they've been adding supplements because they're worried about the potassium levels in the hay. But interestingly, they took Stage Star out of the Sydney Banks, which suggests they don't perhaps feel they've got to the bottom of it yet. So I want to oppose Brave Man's Game at odds on. And I think the horse to do that with is Grumpy Charlie. He's a progressive high-class horse. Brave Man's Game's got to give him £19 when you factor in the jockey's £3 claim. He probably would prefer softer ground, but I'm hoping these extra furlongs will negate that. And at 11-2, I think he'll go close.
We'll move on to James and a nap and a next best, please.
I've kept it simple with the race we previewed. Edwardstone is my nap. Going back in for the Arkle now, I think you're going to get better odds if he does produce the kind of performance I think he will do. I do like him. I've not been impressed by the Irish last weekend. Blue Lord, as Tom said, scrambled home, really riveted the tail, probably would have beaten him with a better jump at the last. So for me, it's one race the UK might win in the novice chase department, and Edwardstone is our chosen contender for me. And Jatois in the Betfair Hurdle, I've just gone the Kalashnikov route, second in the Tolworth, slightly smaller yard and fashionable, 11-1. I think it's a cracking each way price with SBK.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, for James, for your naps and your next best. That leaves us with Tom ahead of last selections for naps and next bests.
Yeah, the guys have both touched on my nap and next best here. The nap is Edwardstone. I just think he's a cert in that race, basically. I don't like third time lucky off the 2-week turnaround. And the other two are front runners as well. So the race should set up for him. And the next best is Authorized Speed, Ross's nap. Loads of good horses have won this listed bumper. This is the 445 at Newbury, I should say. Loads of good horses have won it, including 4 milers, Shut the Front Door, and definitely Red. They won it in the last 10 years. But when it comes to a bumper race, I like to look at horses who are bred to win bumpers or have the speed right now to win a bumper. And Authorized Speed is out there ready to win a bumper. That was the main aim. You look at the quotes after he won last time at Newbury, the owner said the main aim was to win a bumper this year. And with that in mind, I think he's going to win this listed event. 9-2 looks a great price, as Ross said.
Authorized Speed, getting really into these bumper horses. They're a bit of fun when you crack them. And Josh Moore, great to have him back riding winners too. Gary Moore team. There was I think Ryan, Josh, and Jamie all had a winner for him last week. So they're in flying form as well. So a lot of support around Authorized Speed, Edwardstone as well. For myself, my nap, well, I agree with what Ross was saying about taking on the Paul Nicholls horses as you know, as much as you don't want to see a trainer struggling. I do think there is issues there. And I think Clanders a Bow is a horse to oppose in the Denman chase. And an old favourite of mine, Royal Pagaille, if his Peter Marsh chase win hasn't taken a huge amount out of him, because that was a slog and a fight in the end. I do really admire that horse, and I like that the Venetia Williams team are rolling again ahead of hopefully a crack at the Gold Cup. He is my nap at 7-2, and my next best will be Our Power in the handicap chase that we looked at Warwick. And as always, we've got an offer this week. Any new customers can deposit £20, and if your qualifying bet is settled as a loss, we will refund your stake in cash up to £20, but we hope there'll be no losses. There are plenty of agreements here, especially with that horse Authorised Speed. He's the one that I'm taking away from this, and a bit of Edwardstone anti-post now for the Arkle. Hopefully we've given you a few insights ahead of another good weekend's racing. We'll be back again next week. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we will be rejoining you again ahead of more racing this time next week.